Hey, this is Katherine Pannel, psychiatrist in North Mississippi, also medical director of Right Track Medical Group and board member of MSMA. Last week, we talked about how children present as far as anxiety, depression, and what parents and loved ones can do to help them cope with those symptoms. This week, we're going to move on to adults and how they can self-identify anxiety and depression and what you can do about it. So right about now, we have hit the peak of the COVID virus, and we are now hopefully flattening that curve if we've been following what we're supposed to do as far as our sheltering home and social distancing. We are now no longer shelter at home, but we are a safer at home, which basically means that if you can stay home, stay home. That's still the best practice. You know, we can start doing more non-essential things, but I know in my county, we now have to wear masks, even going into the grocery store, regardless, it is now mandatory. So, like I said before, things are ever evolving, ever changing, which also increases anxiety. So now that we are able to kind of move out a little bit more out of our homes, we, for the most part, are still shelter at home if we want to go about the safest practice measures. So that's still isolating. It's still depressing. It's normal to feel down during these times. Like I said a couple series back, as humans are very social creatures. They like to be around people and socialize. Also, touch is very important in our lives. So we're still dealing with those symptoms of depression and anxiety. We're now to a point where we're starting to see some more of the economic fallout from this pandemic. While people are all thinking, we are going to get on the other side of this, there's going to be normalcy again. Now we're starting to see things that we didn't in the beginning, like people losing their jobs, their businesses, how long it's going to take to respond and rebound in our economy. I still have faith that things are going to rebound and we're going to have a stronger economy than ever. But the question is, how long is it going to take us to get there? So adults have lots of worries these days. Primarily in the beginning, it was probably more themselves contracting the virus or their loved ones contracting the virus. I think now that we have seen that with our curve in Mississippi, it is actually starting to flatten, that we've seen that these things the experts have been recommending are actually working. That, in a sense, is probably a little bit calming for us. But we're still dealing with the social isolation, which is, a very high risk factor for depression and suicide. We're also dealing with anxiety, like I said, of the economic fallout and just ever changing, ever evolving recommendations, scenarios that we seriously just have no control over. So how do you deal with it? First, I think it's really important to have insight into it. I know as adults, sometimes we don't think that things like that can happen to us. We don't think that we have depression or anxiety. We can be a little bit stubborn in accepting our symptoms. There have been, barriers in getting good psychiatric treatment for years. Before this pandemic, there was a mental health crisis in the United States, and so many barriers to getting good quality mental health care. And I know one of those barriers, probably the number one barrier, is the stigma surrounded around mental illness. I do love the fact now that all over social media, we're starting to talk about the mental illness, that's a direct result of this virus. It's on the news now, which is great. So I think slowly but surely we are starting to break down that stigma, and the fear to actually seek treatment is going down. The more we talk about mental health care, the more the stigma, the more the wall falls. But then we're left also with, there's not a whole lot of good mental health care treatment available on the outpatient setting. So we do have to take a lot of that on individually and figure out ways that we can learn how to cope with these symptoms. And then if they get to the point where these coping skills are not working, then you seek mental health treatment out in the community. So depression presents in multiple forms in adults. It's different by, gender. Males present differently than females. Older adults present differently than younger adults. But just that overall sense of a low mood, just feeling blue, not yourself, that's a symptom. Depression can affect sleep. I know a lot of people that have depression also have anxiety, and that can cause insomnia. So they may not be sleeping enough during the day, which maybe you then report that that's causing you to sleep even more throughout the day because you're essentially trying to make up for that lack of sleep at night, which in itself can be terrible because you're starting to mess with your sleep cycle. And the number one risk factor for suicide is insomnia. So sleep is huge for everybody. Sleep lays down the foundation for everything, for our health, our happiness, everything. Sleep is crucial. As far as appetite, I know a lot of women come to me saying that their appetite increases during depression. They're emotional eaters. They tend to eat more to get that sense of comfort. However, males, they're the population that they actually eat less when they're depressed. They are the ones that tell you that they've lost weight, that they just don't have an appetite. They don't even feel like eating. Also, anxiety can contribute to lack of appetite. Also see, unfortunately, anxiety in women, they eat more when they're anxious because, again, it's that comfort. So weight loss or weight gain, it can be either one. Just know that if it's a change from your normal, that's when you start seeing it more as a symptom of the depression. Lack of interest, or what we call anhedonia, lack of motivation, just things that you once enjoyed, you're not finding enjoyment in anything. I know when I have new patients present to me and they're saying that they're depressed, I always start by saying, like, what did you used to do that was like your enjoyment, your hobby? What brought you happiness? Say, for instance, running was their hobby, what really made them feel good and they loved doing. If they stop running and they just don't have the motivation to do anymore, the care or the will to do it, that's what we call anhedonia, and it is a symptom of depression. Lack of energy, just that fatigue. Even despite getting good sleep, you just wake up feeling sluggish, no energy. That's also what we call psychomotor retardation, where you just feel slow, like you're just walking through quicksand. The days are long and it's just hard to get through them. And then, unfortunately, suicidal ideation can be a symptom of depression, but if it has gotten to that point, it's what we call that it's severe depression. That's also where things like psychosis come in, like if you are hearing voices that aren't there or seeing things that others can't, that's more along the lines of severe depression. I know kids may see their mom and dad as being a little more short-tempered, more irritable, more, quick to snap at them. We sometimes seek treatment when we realize that we're being irritable towards our kids. We don't have the same patience that we did before we started being depressed. As far as anxiety, it's just that constant sense of worry, the racing thoughts. It can be shortness of breath, chest pressure, racing pulse, racing heart. You can have diaphoresis, which is sweating, anywhere, quite frankly, but it's very common of sweating in the hands, sweating in the armpits. It could even, progress to what we call panic attacks, where you can't catch your breath. You almost feel like you're having a heart attack. There's this big sense of doom. And it's not cardiac and etiology. You don't know when a panic attack will come on. You can't just say, oh, this is what caused it. They come out of the blue. That's why they're so uncomfortable. You can even have like numbness or tingling in your fingers and in your toes. And it can be very alarming. People really feel in that moment that they could possibly die. I will say that no one has ever died, to my knowledge, of a panic attack. So that is reassuring, though they're so miserable, and I'm not minimizing it. Panic attacks are awful. Just know, breathe, they are not going to kill you. So those are the symptoms. And once you've self-identified, like, hey, this is what's going on, how can you fix it? How can you cope with it? Adults are lucky that they're farther in life, that they have established more healthy coping skills. So the things that typically like kids and teens do, we have progressed further and have gotten more mature coping skills. I know many people are anxious people to begin with, and ever since this pandemic, it just seems like the anxiety in people has really skyrocketed. And I think one of the best ways to handle anxiety is just to get outside and exercise. Not only is it just going to wear you out to the point where you can't even mount anxiety, but it just is that good rush of endorphins that makes you really just feel good. So it targets anxiety and depression. Exercise, I know for sure my patients get so tired of hearing me say it. I probably say it in every one of my appointments, whether it's new evaluation or follow-up. I ask them, I said, have you been exercising? And sadly, not a large portion are, but the ones that I can really get to commit to regular exercise, healthy diet, therapy if needed, medications if needed, are really the ones that I see great success in beating depression and anxiety. Exercise is a wonderful coping skill. And the good thing is it's free. You don't need equipment to do it. You don't need a vehicle to do it. All you have to do is go outside, go for a walk, go for a run. Do it with your kids, because if they're anxious, it's going to help them too. And it sets such a good example for a healthy lifestyle for them. So definitely, number one coping skill, get out, do some exercise, which and in that leads with good nutrition, hydration, all of that. Also, just as important is communication. Talking about your worries and your anxiety is one way to get it out there. It's cathartic. So I know for me, both me and my husband are physicians. It's kind of hard to really talk to him about my anxiety because we both are sharing the same anxiety right now. It's, are our practice is going to survive? We're away from our kids, working around people that are potentially sick with COVID. Are we going to bring it back to our kids? So I don't necessarily always want to unload on him because I know that he is sharing the same anxiety. I don't discourage you from talking to your friends, your loved ones, your husband, wives, but there's a fine balance. While it's okay to start talking about them, you just need to make sure that you're not unloading everything and overburdening them with your worries as well. I'm not discouraging you from talking, but just know when there's a point where you need to bounce your worries and concerns on someone else that's, you know, outside of the same picture, the same worries that you're having. And that's where therapists come in. I know I also spouses and friends are guilty of, even though they're feeling anxious or down, they tend to assume the burdens of others. You feel like, oh, to be a good wife, to be a good friend, a good mother, I need to hear their problems, try to work through them. But that also can be very daunting. It can be exhausting, and it can also just worsen the feelings that you're having yourself. So that is where a therapist really comes into play. Even before the pandemic, I also encourage not even just my patients, but even my friends and my family. I think therapy is wonderful. I think we should all have therapy. I think it's just good to bounce off our problems, our thoughts, our concerns, our dilemmas off of a neutral third party. That way you don't feel like you're unloading off of one of your loved ones, and while you are truly not a burden, you don't want to feel like that burden. So having someone there that's their job, is to listen, help you work through things, that third neutral party that can give you the advice that you need without, you know, worrying about offending you or you worrying about offending them. It's just a great way to deal with anxiety and depression. So communication, huge, huge, huge. And then, not to be cheesy, but you know, laughter is truly the best medicine. You know, very rarely is there a time when you're laughing that you can identify still being anxious and sad. I mean, I kind of challenge anybody that can, you know, sit there and laugh and feel those negative symptoms. I just don't think it's possible. So I know in my house we've had lots of fun. And I mean, it is a very challenging time, but we've sure had lots of fun during this pandemic. We've had dance parties in the kitchen. We've cooked and baked and laughed when things spill while we're baking. You know, we've played funny, silly games. It's just been a really good time of family bonding, and there's been so much laughter. So try to find humor in the little things. I've seen families on Facebook do costume nights at dinner, and I mean, there's just been all kinds of just neat ways that families have found time to be together and found ways to laugh. And laughter is contagious. So if the kids see their mom, my poor kids have seen it, see me wildly dancing and singing in the kitchen, despite how bad my voice is and my dance skills are, they think it's hysterical. They laugh hysterically. It's contagious, and we all feel better about it at the end. So laughter, play, be lighthearted, be a child. You know, I have done things I hadn't done in years. Like I went outside and flew a kite with my children. I mean, I literally have not done that in years. We have done so many things that I haven't done in forever, just because there's, you know, we're sheltering at home. So things like we've ridden our bikes more than we ever have. Like I said, I've flown kites. We have done spa days in my house where I've painted the kids' nails and I've let them paint mine, for good or bad. So we've done lots of things that have just, you know, been really nice and refreshing, things that we haven't done before. And it kind of gets them away from the screens. It gets you away from being glued to the TV with that constant repeat of coronavirus information. Look, get it once and get out of it. I mean, get the updates that you need to know, but then you got to move on, because really and truly, things are not going to change as quickly as you're sitting there watching it on TV. So really, maybe watch the news in the morning and the night to get their updates, but seeing the constant death toll, the constant new cases, and things that we're finding out differently that are worrisome, that does not do you any good for your anxiety. So watch the news in the morning and night, turn off. Same as social media. I know everybody's noticed that now on social media, everybody has become the COVID expert. And it's a rapid fire of posts nonstop all day about what they think about it, what they're doing, what they think the treatment is, the politics surrounding it. Step away from that. And that's when spending time with your kids and laughing, that's when that really comes into play. You've got to avoid those negative outside sources because they do no one any good. It's just going to increase your anxiety and depression. To cope with anxiety, another huge way is distraction. I mean, how easy does that sound? But it's so true. If you're not just sitting on your couch all day watching TV, having that constant time to just think about all of your worries and concerns, then you're not going to worry about it. So don't sit and just have an idle mind. An idle mind is not good. Read. I know I never get this much time to read, so it's been nice to catch up on reading and some of the books that I wanted to read. So read, play music. Music is wonderful therapy. Crossword puzzles, anything just really to distract your mind is great for distracting you from being anxious and think about those things that are so worrisome. And I think lastly too is acknowledging that and knowing that there are so many things that are out of our control. There's so many things that are causing anxiety. And you have to just sit, pause, and reflect and say, okay, yes, I'm acknowledging that this, and this could happen, but I'm not going to now. I'm going to stop and really focus on things that I can control. And that's where the exercise, good nutrition, good hydration, getting a good night's sleep, playing with your kids, reading, those are things that you can control in your mental health. You've got control over that. You control that. We cannot control what this virus is going to do, or we cannot control the future. So really stop and be in that moment. That's another thing is don't focus on the worries of tomorrow or even further. Stop and just be present in the now. Because I can say, and I've heard this saying, there's always going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we are going to get to the end of this virus, but we have got to tackle mental health issues right now, or the ramifications from this virus are going to be so much longer lingering. I know this virus, when we look at it, is going to have not lasted even a year, but the mental health issues, if we don't tackle them, can continue to last for years upon years. We've got to stop and tackle it now. And that also leads me to, I know, even if you didn't have addiction issues before, this is the time where you also may have thoughts about using other substances to cope with your anxiety and depression. This is not the time to do it. I know it's so easy to sit on the couch, grab a glass of wine, watch the TV, and that glass of wine starts becoming two, and then it becomes a bottle. Do not use unhealthy coping mechanisms such as alcohol to cope with anxiety and depression. I know you may get that temporary feel-good feeling, but in the end, alcohol is a depressant. It works on the receptors that make you feel down. Same as for sleep. Do not rely on alcohol to help you sleep. Yes, it may help you fall asleep, but alcohol is proven to actually give you far less quality sleep. It interrupts sleep. So don't depend on things like alcohol to be your comfort, because in the end, it has a negative effect. I mean, that temporary feel-good feeling that you have is not long-lasting. You have to continue to drink to catch that feeling. And in the end, it just brings on more issues like addiction, and it messes up your sleep. And then there's weight gain associated with alcohol, a myriad of other health issues. So alcohol is not the way to solve the problem. But those that have struggled with addiction, this is a really, really difficult time for you not to go back to that addiction. I mean, talk about major stress. And that's where these healthy coping mechanisms have really got to come into play. You've got to take them on and take them on seriously, because it's a very difficult challenge for those that have already struggled with addiction not to go back to what was causing the addiction. So if you've put in all those coping mechanisms and you just still aren't there, you're still super depressed, you're still anxious, and even with implementing all of these suggestions, you're still feeling down or anxious, that's again where reaching out for psychiatric treatment helps. Just because you reach out does not mean that we're going to throw pills at you and that you have to take medications to get better. That's not the case. Just simply good coping skills and therapy may be enough for you. But if you're doing the good coping skills and you're doing the therapy and you still feel so down and anxious, do not hesitate to see your psychiatrist for medication management. You should treat mental illness as if any other illness, such as like hypertension or diabetes. You wouldn't go around unmedicated for those conditions, and you shouldn't for depression and anxiety either. If you need medication, it is okay. It does not make you any less of a person. In fact, in my opinion, the fact that you have the insight and that you've tried other things and you're to this point and you're ready to get help is actually a very strong thing in my mind. That means that you've got insight into it and you're ready to tackle it and take it on and do whatever it takes to get over it. I think that that shows what kind of person you are, and that's someone that is very strong in character and in person. It does not make you weaker, that is for sure. So right now, I know we're still able to do telemedicine, even by phone right now. That may change at the end of May, but I do think telemedicine is here to stay. So most psychiatric clinics, I know mine are still accepting new patients, even if you have to do it via the phone. I know that some are still scared to come into clinics, and that's okay. If we could do telemedicine, that's what we should be doing. So call your psychiatric providers. Like I said, there's many clinics that are still doing telemedicine, so they're still taking patients, they're still doing follow-ups. But lastly, if you have not made that appointment where things have just gotten so bad to the point where you are thinking about ending your life, there is a national suicide hotline. I believe the number is 1-800-273-TALK. You may want to Google that and check behind me, but I'm pretty sure that's it. It's 1-800-273-TALK. It is a national suicide hotline, and they can advise you on the next steps, such as, do you need to go to the ER? Will they be able to arrange hospitalization, or do you need a quicker appointment with your outpatient provider? They're just able to walk you through those steps to make sure that you're safe, because in the end, that's all that matters is your safety. So I hope that that helps a little bit for the adults. Like I said, adults have many, many anxieties. I probably could talk for hours about it all, but we don't have that much time today. So that is all for today. I think we'll have one more module, and I'd really like to address healthcare workers in that. But then also, if anybody has any questions that they want to call into MSMA or post under this video, I'll try to get them answered in the next module. So until then, thanks, stay safe.